Hello, folks. Tonight we're diving into silk, sweat, and the subtle power games of a concubine in feudal Japan. Picture this. You've been trained your whole life to master the arts of sex, walking, sighing, and seducing a daimyo with just the right flick of your wrist. So, before you get too comfy, take a sec to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually dig what I'm doing here. And hey, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always fun to see who's tuning in from around the globe. Now, dim those lights. Maybe turn on a fan for some soothing background noise. Let's embark on tonight's journey together. Dawn arrives with all the subtlety of a polite knock. No roosters, no trumpets, just the faint glow through rice paper doors and the soft footsteps of servants, pretending not to judge how you're sprawled out on the bed. You lie perfectly still, not because you're relaxing, but because any sudden move could wreck your aura of grace and mystery. Actually, your back's killing you. Your hair's plastered to one side, and you're dreaming about eels you'd rather not analyze, but none of that matters now. This is the opening scene of the day's show. You're the star and the stage decoration all rolled into one. Your servants enter whispering, bowing so low you briefly consider stepping over them. A basin of warm water is placed before you, as if to say, here's your dignity, now wash behind your ears. They start their work cleaning, brushing your teeth, prepping you to look more like a mysterious porcelain figure than someone who just rolled out of bed. You get a gentle face wash, hair carefully combed, not because they love you, but because they've seen what happens to girls who show up with curly hair at the party. Meanwhile, you keep a calm, cool face, only slightly annoyed, silent, because it's forbidden for a concubine to speak before the powder goes on. You sneak a glance at your reflection in the polished bronze mirror. You look like someone with opinions, but who's getting paid not to share them? Perfect. From behind the sliding screen, the daimyo's barely contained chuckle drifts in, sounding oddly energetic for this morning. Could be a good sign or a warning. You remind yourself to avoid direct eye contact with his favorite concubine until after tea. You rise from the futon like a swan emerging from the mist, thinking the swan might have slightly numb legs and a tight sash. Waiting for its near future, your sleeves are flared out, incense is lit, illusions begin, and as you stretch just a bit, you whisper the universal chant of women everywhere. Here we go again. Now you sit up straight and pretend you didn't sleep awkwardly. It's time for makeup, or as concubines call it, a little historical self-erasure with poison. Step 1. White powder made from ground rice, and sometimes enough lead to qualify as construction material. The servant gently pats it onto your face, like she's trying to cover up a crime scene. The goal, erase every sign of life. If your skin tone matches anything natural, you screwed up. Next, the neck and chest. Because the daimyo is forbidden from seeing any patch of skin that doesn't look painted on by a ghost. You sit still while they stroll around town with a cigarette, occasionally fighting the urge to sneeze and ruin your new identity. Then come the eyebrows, your real ones don't matter. They get painted over and redrawn a few centimeters higher, giving off a I'm shocked by everything and can't show it vibe. Theoretically, this is supposed to be alluring. Now for the lips, you'd expect full-on lipstick. But nope, just a tiny red dot in the center. It's meant to look demure, but really you just look like you kissed a plum and ran away. Still, you nod in approval, because that's tradition. If it feels weird and a bit uncomfortable, congratulations, you're probably doing it right. And finally, the rebellious Piesta, blackened teeth. Yes, step 1, white powder made from ground rice, and sometimes enough lead to qualify as actual building material. The attendant starts gently patting it onto your face, like she's trying to cover up a crime scene. The goal: erase every sign of life. If your skin looks like any natural color, you've already screwed up. Next up is your neck and chest because, heavens forbid, the daimyo sees a patch of skin that doesn't look like it was painted by a ghost. You sit still while they wander the town with a cigarette, occasionally fighting the urge to sneeze and blow your new identity. Then come the eyebrows, which, by the way, have nothing to do with your real ones. They get painted over and redrawn a few centimeters higher, giving off that I'm shocked by everything and emotionally unavailable vibe. Theoretically, this is considered alluring. Next, the lips. You'd think they'd get a full makeover, right? Nope. Just a tiny red dot right in the middle. It's supposed to look shy. Instead, you look like you just kissed a plum and ran away. But hey, you nod in agreement because that's how tradition rolls. If it feels weird and slightly uncomfortable, congratulations, you're doing it right. And finally, the pièce de resistance, blackening the teeth. Yep, really, a chunk of iron powder is carefully brushed onto your teeth, making your smile look like it's been censored. They say it signals you're not allowed to laugh. In reality, it just confuses people and gives you an extra reason not to smile too often. Seriously, a carefully brushed on patch of iron paste sticks to your teeth, making your smile look like it's been censored. People thought it meant you weren't allowed to laugh. In reality, it just confused everyone and gave you another excuse not to smile too often. Through it all, you sit like a statue vandalized by a very polite group of artists. You don't move, you don't comment, and you definitely don't ask, is this really necessary? The answer is always yes. Not because it makes sense, but because it's been done this way for centuries. And nobody wants to be the first to blink. In the end, you look like a living painting. If the painting was made by someone who hates flesh and loves drama, after your face is dusted with an emotionally distant kabuki mask, it's time to get dressed. And by get dressed, we don't mean slipping into something comfy. We mean prepping for a fabric-based endurance challenge. Step 1, the layers underneath. These are breathable cotton pieces designed to stop your fancy outfit from melting into your soul during summer. Spoiler, they fail, but at least they try. Next up, the inner robe. Decorative, symbolic, and totally unnecessary, except, totally necessary. Each garment must go on in the exact order, or your social status will drop faster than a clumsy geisha on ice. Color combos are coded. For example, dark red over pale green means elegant yet mysterious, while white on yellow screams Please don't talk to me before tea. Then comes the outer kimono, heavier, shinier, and way less comfy. By now, your sleeves are long enough to cover a rival concubine if needed, which is why no one stands too close during morning prep. And finally, the obi, the belt that tightens everything up and silently threatens to kill your spine. It's pulled so tight, you're reminded you're not allowed to breathe freely until the sun sets. A tightly tied obi says a lot. Sophistication, calm, and the silent desperation of someone who's one sneeze away from collapsing entirely. Of course, you don't dress yourself. You stand still while two servants wrap, fold, pull, and tweak you like they're trying to origami a human. They say nothing. They just mutter quietly when something isn't perfectly flat. That muttering means raise your arm higher. You learn the language. When they finish, you've lost all feeling in your ribs. But hey, you look fabulous like a royal scroll with passive-aggressive eyes. And seriously, this is her everyday outfit. She doesn't even have plans. She could just sit in the garden pretending to read poetry all day. But she has to look like she's ready for a royal portrait or a surprise seduction, which, honestly, isn't impossible. Now fully dressed, it's impressive considering she's wearing more fabric than a tiny tent. Breakfast time, or as the concubines call it, a test of restraint, posture, and not accidentally dipping your sleeve into the miso. She sits on a cushion, legs folded correctly, looking graceful if she's a folding fan pro, but a nightmare if her knees hurt. A tray is placed in front of her, neatly arranged, a bowl of rice, a grilled fish slice, 3 kinds of pickled veggies, and a bowl of miso that definitely looks like it's judging her. The portions are small because she's not here to gain weight. She's here to look slender and a bit underfed, just like those romantic metaphors everyone loves. Her job is to eat just enough to avoid stuffing herself, but not enough to suggest she's enjoying the meal. Chew too enthusiastically. And someone raises an eyebrow, ask for seconds, and someone brandishes a scroll. Eat in silence, no slurping, no sighing, and definitely no grimacing, even when a pickled plum hits your mouth. Everything must be graceful. It's a ballet of chopsticks and disappointment. Your kimono sleeves are wide, so she's not spending all day reading poetry, but she has to look like she's ready for a royal portrait or a surprise seduction scene, which, honestly, isn't impossible. Now dressed to the nines, impressive considering she's wearing more fabric than a tiny tent. Breakfast time, or as the concubine world calls it, a lesson in restraint, posture, and absolutely no accidental sleeve dunking in the miso. She sits on a cushion, legs folded just right, looking stunning if she's a fan of folding fans, but a nightmare if her knees hate her. A tray is set neatly in front of her, a bowl of rice, a piece of grilled fish, 3 types of pickled veggies, and a bowl of miso soup that looks like it's silently judging her. The portions are tiny because she's not here to bulk up. She's here to look sleek and slightly underfed, just like all those romantic metaphors you pretend to understand. Her mission is to eat just enough to avoid overeating, but not so much that it looks like she's enjoying the meal. Chew too enthusiastically. Someone raises an eyebrow. Ask for seconds. And someone flashes a scroll. Eat quietly. No slurping, no sighing, and definitely no grimacing. Even when that pickled plum hits your mouth, it's got to be graceful. A ballet of chopsticks and disappointment. Your kimono sleeves are wide, so every bite demands spatial awareness, usually reserved for sword fighting. You develop techniques. You roll your sleeves up to your forearms, lean slightly to one side, pray your sleeve doesn't drag through the soup, and flick a fermented tofu bit onto the tatami mat. Meanwhile, the attendants silently hover around. They don't say a word, but they're watching, not in a creepy way. More like we'll gossip about this later. Every blink is noted. Every missed grain of rice is mentally recorded with mild embarrassment. You finish eating, bow lightly, and put down your chopsticks with the kind of reverence usually reserved for holy relics. Breakfast is done, satisfied emotionally. No, nutritionally, still questionable, but mentally. You feel lighter. Maybe it's the food, or maybe it's something else. The OB cutting off blood flow to your spine. Either way, you're ready for the next part of the day, which, spoiler alert, is mostly waiting. You've been powdered, robed, and fed something barely bigger than toddler snack time. Now it's time for the main daily job of a concubine waiting. But not just any waiting. Waiting with style. Waiting like you're quietly whispering, "Yeah, I'm totally free this afternoon." But in a really intense way. You can't just wander the estate. Nope. That's how scandals happen. Instead, you sit in your assigned spot, a sleek, minimalist garden room with painted screens, a potted plant, and a strategic view of a koi pond that's been about as exciting as watching paint dry since last fall. You sit and wait occasionally. You adjust your posture so you look like you're pondering eternity, not wrestling a leg cramp. Impatience is forbidden. That's reserved for merchants and wives. Concubines wait as if they're bestowing a favor on you. This waiting can last 10 minutes or 5 hours. Daimo might summon you or not. He could be with another woman, reading war poetry, or just napping with his head on some ridiculously expensive pillow. The point is, you'll know when someone tells you or when they don't. To kill time. You might write a poem, not a good one, just some vague, sad stuff about plum blossoms and unspoken longing. That's the genre. Bonus points if no one can figure out who it's about. You could also play the shamisen gently. Not fun. No one likes a concubine who looks too excited. Of course, other women are waiting too. Sometimes right in front of you, sometimes out of earshot. This is a silent competition. Who looks the most serene? Who adjusted her robe just right? Who caught the eye of the messenger delivering tea to Daimo's quarters? This is chess played with glances, posture, and whether your oboe is tied off-center in a fashionable way. The hardest part is looking like you're not waiting at all. You have to act like your entire self-worth isn't riding on getting summoned tonight, and of course it is. But you're a pro. You sigh softly, beautifully, and gaze distantly, preferably at something poetic, like a falling leaf or a koi fish that looks just as bored as you do. If morning is prep time, afternoon is positioning, and we're not talking yoga. This is courtly social strategy silk dresses and plum blossom scented oils. By now, the other concubines have assembled. You nod to each other, branches are thin, smiles warm but sharp enough to cut glass. This isn't friendship, it's focused espionage. Everyone's watching, listening, and silently trying to wreck each other's reputations without saying a word. The room is quiet. Tension smells like flowers. Conversation topics are carefully trivial. Lady Aiko's handwriting has improved translation. She usually writes like a drunk monk. This morning, Daimo looks very serene. Translation. He's not summoning you, is he? And of course, the classic, you look radiant today, actually means you look fresher than usual. Congrats. Compliments are verbal knives wrapped. In politeness, the sharper the smile, the more likely you're offended. A timely comment about someone's too modern kimono can trigger a week-long existential crisis. You handle it gracefully, or at least fake a gentle smile, tilt your head as you listen, look impressed by someone's haiku, even though it's clearly copied from a folding screen. Then it's time for someone to mention Daimo. Maybe they saw him walking by the pond. Maybe he stopped to admire a fan, at least pretending to smile gently. Tilt your head when listening, looking impressed by someone's haiku, even though it's obviously copied from some folding screen. Then someone mentions Daimo. Maybe they saw him strolling near the pond. Maybe he stopped to check out a fan that one of the other concubines accidentally left behind. The room goes quiet but calm, like no one inside is actually freaking out. This is when performance kicks up a notch. You look interested in him, but not too interested, so confident but not cocky, available but untapped, like trying to be the dessert everyone wants, but no one's sure if it's safe to eat. And through it all, you keep your voice soft, posture perfect, and your insults indirect. This is how you climb the ranks, not by war, but by whispers. And if you leave the room with even one rival suspicious about your sleeve choice, your poem, or her scent, then congrats, you did well today. You still haven't been summoned, but hope lingers, sweating quietly under 12 layers of silk. So, when the sun dips to its peak and you survive another round of eye contact, it's time to take a bath just in case things go south. Not mandatory, just highly recommended. Also, don't walk into the daimyo's private room smelling like anxiety and pickled radishes. The bath is quiet, steam swirling, with a faint yuzu peel scent and a side of pressure. You have to get undressed with help because most concubines can't escape the maze of ties, folds, knots, and the moral constraints that come with formal kimono wear alone. After shedding the outer layers, finally free from human bindings, you step into the hot water for a brief moment. You are nobody, not a symbol, not a strategy, just a sweaty woman in a tub wondering if she shaved her legs evenly enough for a noble with questionable eyesight. You scrub, but not too hard. There's a technique. You want clean, not desperate. A light fragrance is dabbed on. Nothing fancy. You're not trying to be a geisha to prove a point. Just enough allure to suggest you own a personal fan. Hair slicked back with oil, skin dusted off, feet checked for calluses, because yes, even your heels have to be ready for men who haven't trimmed their nails since the last rice harvest. And all this might be for nothing. You might not get calls, you might. Go back to your room, touch up your powder, and sit quietly composing vague, emotional poems about ducks. But if he summons you and you show up smelling like stress and raw tofu, shame on you. So, you bathe, prepare, soften up, get subtle and flammable with essential oils, because being ready is part of the game, even if the invite never comes. Also, the best revenge against other concubines is looking better than them without even trying. This doesn't happen with trumpets. No scrolls unfurl, no impressive fanfares when the summons finally arrives. It comes like most terrifying things in high society, politely, with a soft knock, a bowing messenger, and just one line. His lordship requests your presence. Translation, you've been chosen. Also, you've got 20 minutes to psych yourself up, refuel, and mentally separate. Your servant will act immediately. Meanwhile, try not to look smug or nauseous. After all, this could be a compliment. Maybe he likes you, or maybe the one he really likes is pissed at him, and you're just the intern. Either way, tonight, you're on stage. First up, reapplying powder to mask existential dread. A touch of blush for that lively yet mysterious vibe. And carefully adjusting your outer kimono, you switch to a pricier one, embroidered with flying cranes, because nothing says I'm worth undressing slowly, like birds stitched in gold thread. Next, hair. Perfect already, but better safe than sorry. You lightly comb it, no fuss, and add a dab of yuzu oil behind your ears. You smell like restraint and ambition. Walking toward his private room, the hallway stretches forever, each step measured, not too fast, politely. A soft knock, a bowing messenger, one single sentence. His request for your presence. Translation, you've been chosen. Also, you've got 20 minutes to get your head in the game, refuel, and mentally separate yourself. Your servant will act immediately. Meanwhile, try not to look smug or nauseous. After all, this might be a compliment. Maybe he likes you, or maybe the one he likes is annoyed with him, and you're just the apprentice. Either way, tonight, you're on stage. First, reapply a fresh layer of powder to hide existential dread, a touch of blush to look lively but mysterious, and carefully adjust your outer kimono. You switch to the pricier kind, the one embroidered with cranes and flight, because nothing says worthy of slow undressing like golden threaded symbolic birds. Next, hair. It's perfect already, but double check anyway. You lightly comb it. Nothing fancy. Then dab a bit of yuzu oil behind your ears. You smell like restraint and ambition. Walking toward his private room, the hallway stretches endlessly, every step measured, not too fast, not rushed. You're a river, not a waterfall. Behind the closed door, Rival concubines pretend not to care, but they're definitely paying attention. Oh, yes. You step inside the inner room. A screen slides open. You bow deeply and gracefully. You're not nervous, just hyper aware of every inch of your body and whether your lipstick is smudged. Does he greet you or no? Whatever. You flash a weak smile anyway. Now you're in character, the favorite, the entertainment, the appetizer for the evening. Nope. Who says it doesn't go like that? You're here because you were chosen, and for the next few hours, you must be art, charm, and everything rolled into one. There's still tea left to pour, despite what lady lawyers and gossip queens might say. A night with a daimyo doesn't start with undressing. It starts with ceremony, a slow, fragrant stroll into flirting so formal it could be mistaken for a tense tea ceremony. Don't sit too close yet. Not the time. Between you two is a lacquered table, a quietly warming sake pot, and enough glances to fuel a haiku anthology. He pours you a cup. That's your cue. You sip slowly, like it's not just fermented rice, but a secret, seductive invitation coated in liquid form. Compliments bounce back and forth. Your robe is stunning. Your hair looks amazing. No one mentions that you both know exactly how tonight ends, but pretending you don't, that's half the fun. The chat drifts poetry, dreams, sometimes tales of a hawk he once saw that looked like fate itself. You nod like you're into it, not just because his hand is inching closer. You've heard the hawk story thrice, but that's not the point. The point is tonight. You're the muse, even if you're also a well-trained performer. Maybe there's music. A soft shamisen tune, definitely not played by you. You're busy catching every eye in the room like a delicate fan. Open, mysterious, maybe a little sharp. Then comes the light touch, starting gentle, a hand brushing yours. A compliment on your scent, carefully phrased to say admiration, not obsession. If he's feeling poetic, he might compare you to a plum blossom trapped in snow. If he's tired, you can say, looking handsome tonight. Either way, you smile and bow like he just recited a love poem straight from Mount Fuji. Eventually, the formality fades, the table moves, the lights dim, the paper door closes. And of course, you slowly rise to follow him to the next room. This isn't a business deal, it's a stage play. And your role is to be everything all at once desirable, graceful, obedient, and memorably charming without ever looking like you're trying. No pressure. You just have to charm a lord using 3 centuries of social ritual and a strategically timed look. Let's be clear. This isn't romance. It's a government-approved drama with 2 leads, 0 lines, and a heroic supporting cast. You enter the room like moonlight incarnate, or at least, that's the goal. You kneel, bow, and smile. No tripping. That was last month's problem. You've literally been trained for this months of posture lessons, touch techniques, breath control, and facial expressions that say, yes, I'm into this, without ever crossing into, hey, let's get real. The futon's simple, the bedding's clean, the air smells faintly of incense, promising serenity, though really it just tickles your nose and dares you not to sneeze. The Lord starts the ceremony with touch, at first soft, measured. He's feeling things out or reminding himself whose mistress you are. You respond just enough to show interest, but not enough to seem desperate. Remember, mystery is sexy, desperation, not so much. No chit-chat. Ends with a poem. It's all about presence. Now you're both in character. Whatever happens, smile and bow like he just recited a love poem straight from Mount Fuji himself. Finally, formality fades. The table is moved. Lights dim. The screen door closes. And of course, you slowly stand to follow him into the next room. This isn't a transaction. This is a stage, and your role is to be everything at once desirable, graceful, obedient, and memorably charming without ever seeming like you're trying. No pressure. You just have to seduce a lord using 3 centuries of social etiquette and a strategically timed look. Let's be clear. This isn't romance. This is a government-approved play with 2 leads, no lines, and a heroic supporting cast. You enter the room like moonlight incarnate, or at least that's the goal. You kneel, bow, and smile. No stumbling this time. That was last month. You've been trained for this. Literally, months of lessons on posture, touch, breath control, and facial expressions that say, yes, I like this, without ever crossing into anything crude like honesty. The futon is simple, the bedding clean, the air carries a hint of incense, promising peace, although it mostly just makes your nose itch and tempts you not to sneeze. He begins the ritual by touching, at first soft, measured, so he's probing the situation, or maybe just reminding herself who she belongs to. You respond just right, showing some interest, but not so much you look desperate. Remember, mystery is sexy, desperation, not so much. No small talk here. End with a poem. This is about presence. Now, both of you are playing the part. You, the mighty lord, and her, the eager bloom just opening tonight. You move as you were taught, graceful, precise, like a choreographer who's never loved but read a ton of love poetry. You make the right noises at the right moments. Not too loud, not silent just enough to let him know he's nailing it. Even if you're mentally rearranging your poetry roles, graceful, precise, like a choreography from someone who's never actually been in love, but has read a ton of love poetry. You make the right sounds at the right time. Not too loud, not too quiet, just enough to let him know he's doing okay, even if your brain is busy rearranging poetry roles in your head. He knows he's nailing it, even when you're rearranging poetry roles in your head. It finally ends either in victory or a slow fade out you'll later call a gentle goodbye. He might say something, or maybe not. Either way, you smile, you stand up, straighten yourself, and bow carefully, hiding the dents on your scalp and the cramp that's starting somewhere in Act 2. Then you leave. No looking back. No asking how it went. You don't. Ask if he remembers your name, because this isn't about connection. This is about position. And tonight, you nailed it. He's out cold, sprawled on the futon like a man who just conquered a province, not someone who barely survived a mild effort. You lie next to him, eyes open, back straight, mind spinning, not overwhelmed with feelings. But because this part, the afterglow, is where the real mental gymnastics begin. Did you do well? Is your hair still somewhat in place? Does he like the way you tilt your head? Should you moan a bit more? Or is that breath too loud? These are the questions you won't ask, but will obsess over like a general analyzing battlefield losses. Can you even move yet? Leaving too early seems cold. Staying too long feels clingy. So you just lie there staring at the ceiling, counting bamboo slats, wondering if the other concubines are awake yet. Maybe. They probably smell the summoning like wolves, smelling fear. The silence is heavy, not uncomfortable, just full of unsaid things, unanswered questions, and a sliver of hope for a better breakfast tomorrow. He might mumble something, a compliment, a name, hopefully yours. You nod in the dark, even though he's snoring like a guy who never had to sleep with his dignity folded inside his obi. Finally, you quietly get up. The subtle art of slipping away post-coitus is a thing. You put on your robe, tie the belt, and straighten your hair just enough to look like a mysterious woman. Not a sweaty mess. No one's in the hallway. But you walk like everyone's watching, because here they always are. Your steps are light, your face neutral, your heart locked away. Behind your best performance yet, you head back to your room. Someone's already lit a lamp. The tea's still warm. You drink it without tasting. You sit alone, and only then do you exhale. You don't know if tonight means anything. You don't know if he'll remember or if you will. But at least you know this. You were chosen, and in this world, that's currency. Even if it only lasts until sunrise, you wake early, not refreshed, because concubines don't sleep in. That's for wives, men, or mythical creatures without political rivals. The futon you crashed on last night feels smaller, or maybe you're just realizing you really only hold a tiny spot in the palace hierarchy. A decorative presence, wrapped in tightly controlled expectations. A servant enters, politely avoiding your gaze. No one mentions where you were last night, but everyone knows. The faint scent of incense lingers on your skin, and your hair is just a bit messier than that impossible-to-touch perfect look. They start their work with fresh powder, brushing, folding, restoring the masterpiece. That is your public face, looking suspiciously like yesterday's masterpiece. The only real difference being you're now painfully aware of how exhausting beauty really is. The silence between you and the servants feels companionable, but also loaded with silent judgment. Someone clears their throat. Another casually mentions that Lady Ko received a rare silk comb this morning. You nod. The game goes on. No summaries, no recaps. You don't tell anyone the daimyo smelled faintly of plum wine, or that he muttered some vague poetic nonsense before dozing off mid-sentence. Chosen, and in this world, that's currency. Even if it only lasts until sunrise, you wake up early again, not because you're refreshed, but because concubines don't sleep in. That luxury is reserved for wives, men, or mythical creatures with zero political rivals. The futon you collapsed onto last night feels smaller. Or maybe you're just realizing you actually hold a tiny spot in the palace hierarchy. Decorative presence wrapped in tightly controlled expectations. A servant enters, politely avoids your eyes. No one mentions where you were last night, but everyone knows. A faint scent of incense lingers on your skin, and your hair's just a little messier than the untouchable perfect look. They start the process, fresh powder, brushing, folding, recreating the masterpiece that is your public face, basically the same as yesterday's masterpiece. Except now, you're painfully aware how exhausting beauty really is. The silence between you and the servants is companionable, but laced with silent judgment. Someone clears their throat. Another casually mentions that Lady Ko received a rare silk comb this morning. You nod. The game goes on. No summaries, no replays. You don't tell anyone the daimyo smelled faintly of plum wine, or that he mumbled some vague poetry before dozing off mid-sentence. You definitely don't mention that now. You have to second-guess every eye contact moment. That would be unseemly. Instead, you sit calmly in your room, poised and elegant, prepping for another day, another passive fight disguised as flower-arranging critiques and shamisen practice. You sip tea, write half a poem, stare at a crane outside your window, and wonder what flying away from all this in just one layer of clothes would feel like. By now, the news has spread. Everyone knows you've been summoned. Everyone's recalculating, including you, because that's the real deal of being a concubine, balancing feelings with strategy, intimacy with silence, desire with absolute quiet. You smooth down your sleeves, breathe. Today, you're not the favorite, but you're still in the game, and in this palace, survival looks a lot like Silk's stillness. You don't need ears to catch palace gossip, just good instincts and a PhD in passive-aggressive expression within an hour of sunrise. Your name echoes through at least 3 courtyards, 2 tea rooms, and 1 suspiciously noisy flower-arranging session. A crane outside the window, wondering what it feels like to fly away from all this wearing just 1 layer, wondering what your clothes will look like. By now, the news has spread like wildfire. Everyone knows you've been summoned. Everyone's recalculating, including you, because that's the real deal with being a concubine, balancing feelings with math, intimacy with strategy, and desire with absolute silence. You smooth down your sleeves. You breathe. Today, you're not the favorite, but hey, you're still in the game. And in this palace, survival looks a lot like silk smooth silence. You don't need ears to catch palace gossip, just a sharp instinct and a PhD-level understanding of passive-aggressive subtext. Within an hour of sunrise, your name's echoed through at least 3 courtyards, 2 tea rooms, and 1 suspiciously noisy flower-arranging session. Of course, no one said it outright. Instead, it's stuff like, she looks radiant this morning, which really means she's glowing because she got picked, and we're all pretending not to notice. I wonder if His Majesty prefers classic poetry or the livelier Friends these days. Translation: she probably read some silly line but still got chosen. Unbelievable. You catch these whispers as you pass by murmurs, sneaking behind fan wielders or sewn into casual chatter like tiny poison seeds. Somehow, it's impressive, like watching trained assassins hide behind flower metaphors. Your job, stay quiet. Zip it. Smile slightly like a cat who knows exactly what's up. Casual chats are like tiny poison seeds. Somehow, it's impressive, like watching trained assassins disguised as flowers. Your job: stay quiet. Don't say a word. Smile softly, like a cat that knows something you don't. Because gossiping is dangerous, but being the target and reacting, that's downright deadly. So instead, you disappear a bit. You walk a little longer. You sit a bit farther from the group. You practice calligraphy so intensely that people start wondering if you're enlightened or just quietly scheming. Either way, it's good, because in the harem arena, invisibility is a superpower. Loud people get noticed, the noticed get envied, and envy here is basically a dagger wrapped in silk. You respond to snarky compliments with politeness so sharp it stings. Oh, you think my robe is too fancy? Thanks, it's a gift. Smile, bow, escape the scene. You survive with restraint, timing, and sometimes a glance that says, I could ruin you if I cared. While others fight for power, you perfect the art of subtle distance. You don't have to be the center of attention just because you once were. It starts subtly, less eye contact, slower summons. One day, the maid forgets your favorite scent again. Your tea's lukewarm. The message is clear, not harsh, not cruel, just indifferent. You're no longer the mystery of the night. Someone else is. Is she the new girl? Maybe she just had a breakthrough and wrote a timely poem. Either way, suddenly she's the center of attention. The spotlight fan turns away from you. You handle it like a pro. No complaints, no drama, just a slightly longer pause before bowing to the daimyo and an almost invisible smile when someone says, Lady Hannah looks so youthful and charming. Doesn't she? Of course. Youth is charming and fleeting. Now comes the real test. Can you stay calm? When you're quietly replaced, can you cross your arms and admire the new girl's hairpin while calculating in your head how long before her own ambition trips her up? This is the unspoken part of the job. Not just being chosen, but being gracefully discarded. Losing favor isn't a scandal. It's just a shift in the game. You're still in the palace, still dressed like a masterpiece, still performing. But the spotlight has moved on, and now you survive in the shadows without showing it. You still appear in the garden, still compose poetry, still sit quietly at tea while everyone tries to figure out how your cup trembles. But the truth is, you care. Of course, you do. Not just because of him, but because of status, recognition, the tiny power he gets by being the center of a tightly controlled universe. And now you're a supporting character in someone else's story, but you're still here, still poised, still calm, still waiting, because in a palace like this, everything eventually changes. Fortune, fashion, favorites. One wrong word, a broken fan, or a poetic rain metaphor that sounds too personal. So you wait. Don't get bitter. Be patient. Because if favor can fade, it can come back, and you'll be ready when it does. Eventually, the paint peels off, not just the white rice powder you wear like armor, but the performance, the posture, the carefully timed pauses between words at some point, whether years later or just a lonely moment. You'll catch a glimpse of yourself without the costume, and oddly enough, you're still there. Beneath the layers of fabric, reputation, envy, poetry, and politeness is a woman who remembers everything. The first summons, the first praise, the first time she realized she was no longer the favorite. You've played. Beneath the layers of fabric, reputation, envy, poetry, and politeness is a woman who remembers everything. The first summons, the first compliment, the first time she realized she wasn't the favorite anymore. You've played every role: the muse, the rival, the enigma, the shadow. You smiled through rejection and wrote haikus while silently plotting your emotional survival. And what do you get for all that A backbone tougher than your belt? A memory sharper than any court gossip. Plus, a palace full of women who either fear you, envy you, or secretly hope they age half as well as you. Because here's the unspoken secret: the ages of concubines. They fade, but somehow they last forever. Half your age, too, because here's the secret. No one talks about the ages of the concubines. They fade. Sure, but they're also eternal. And in a world built on keeping desire alive, persistence is the ultimate rebellion. You don't have to rush to the mirror the minute the messenger arrives anymore. No more stressing if your hair's clipped at the exact angle to look seductive. Some days you skip the whole makeup ritual and just sit by the koi pond because watching fish somehow feels more real than trying to look like a poem. Yeah, you're still rocking silk, but now it's for you, not the court. And when fresh-faced girls roll in, makeup thick, eyes bright, strutting down the halls you once ruled, you smile, not politely, not bitterly, but with knowing smirk. Because you played the game. You danced on the edge of power with painted lips and whispered words. And you're still here, graceful, dangerous in your silence. When the paint wears off, what's left you, and that's worth way more than anyone expected. When the polish fades, what's left you, and that's more than anyone bargained for. In ancient Babylon, the line between sacred and sexy wasn't just blurry, it was totally erased. The heart of this mystery, those towering temples to Ishtar, goddess of love, fertility, and war, unlike the fake moral outrage that popped up centuries later. Babylonians saw sex as a divine connection, a way to get close to the gods, not to offend them. In those temples, sex rituals weren't just accepted, they were expected, and this wasn't done in some dark corner, but right out in the open, visible from the heavens, according to ancient sources, especially Herodotus, the world's most relentless gossip. Every Babylonian woman had to visit Ishtar's temple at least once in her life. She'd wait there, perfumed and praying, until a stranger tossed a silver coin into her lap, the price of the goddess. No woman could say no. The act itself, sex with a stranger, wasn't shameful, but sacred. A public sacrifice of the body for the universe's sake. The temple wasn't a brothel, not in the way we think. It was more like a stage where religion and desire performed rituals older than kings. And the women serving there, the Nadu, were anything but lowly. Many were nuns or noble daughters, draped in silk and mystery. Their job was spiritual, sensual, and sexual all at once. The idea was simple and shockingly radical. By having sex under the gods' watchful eyes, you could pray for fertility, win divine favor, and keep cosmic order ticking. The earth would bloom, rivers flow, wombs open. This wasn't sin. It was a sacred ecosystem. But let's not romanticize too much. Even back then, not everyone bought into this so-called sacred sex. Later Mesopotamian rulers tried to distance themselves from the custom, maybe for moral reforms or political reasons. But for a brief, shining moment in Babylon's history, bodies weren't shameful vessels. They were altars, and the whispering walls of Ishtar's temple still echo with the long-forgotten moans of worship. If Babylon made sex a sacred duty, the ancient Greeks turned it into theater, complete with masks, wine, and secrets. At the center of the story is Dionysos, god of wine, ecstasy, and truth. Nothing captures his spirit like the Dionysian mysteries, private initiations where participants sought to erase the line between mortal and divine. This wasn't your average temple visit. The mysteries were kept hidden in groves or secret hideouts far from the prying eyes. Only the initiated could enter, and what happened inside was heavily guarded. Outsiders guessed at wild drunken parties, private initiation rites where participants try to erase the line between human and divine. This isn't your usual temple visit. Secrets, kept hidden in bushes or remote hideouts, far from prying eyes. Only the initiated get in, and what happens inside is guarded like Fort Knox. Outsiders guess wild drunken parties, but surprise, it's way more complicated than that. The participants, men and women alike, prepare through fasting, music, dancing, and long processions. They wear masks, animal skins, and sometimes, brace yourself, nothing at all. The goal, to shed social identity, ego, even your name. For a few hours, you're not a merchant, a servant, or a noble. You're part of something primal, something older than the city walls. Sexual energy might. The whole point to strip you of your social identity, your ego, even your name. For a few hours, you're not a merchant, a servant, or some fancy noble. You become part of something primal, something older than the city walls themselves. Sexual energy might play a role not for fun, but as a symbol of rebirth and unity. In a society where life is super tightly controlled, these rites let you break the order carefully. They promise purification, temporary tearing down of walls between men and women, rich and poor, mere mortals and gods. But this isn't just a wild night in the woods. People say these mysteries can bring deep transformation. Those who return claim they've touched the divine, glimpsed something beyond reason. And honestly, plenty of newbies describe feeling renewed, like chaos burned away their illusions. Of course, not everyone was on board. Philosophers like Plato totally distrusted these ecstatic rituals, worried they'd drag people away from logic and discipline. But for many Greeks, Dionysian mysteries were the missing piece in their stiff public lives. They offered what temples and politics couldn't: emotional truth. And that's the kicker. These rituals weren't about scandal, they were about transcendence. By embracing their inner wildness, the Greeks believed they could touch something sacred. Over in ancient Egypt, fertility wasn't just about crops or having babies. It was the lifeblood of the kingdom, and no river symbolized that better than the Nile. Every year, the floods would rise, bringing fertile silt and life across the land. Egyptians saw this as a holy act, a sacred marriage between heaven and earth, and they celebrated with rituals that were anything but subtle. One of the most eye-catching festivals honored Min as the god of fertility, agriculture, and male power. His statues left little to the imagination, usually shown with an exaggerated symbol of virility. Min wasn't just about life, but about strength. At his annual festival, crowds gathered to watch the pharaoh himself perform the harvest ritual, cutting the first sheaf of grain to offer to the god. But this wasn't just an agricultural thing. Dancers performed naked or in revealing outfits, celebrating the human body's beauty and its role in creation. Hymns, rhythmic drums, and incense created an atmosphere that blurred the lines between spiritual ecstasy and sensory pleasure. Women played a big part in many of these rituals, especially in the wine-fueled festival for Hathor, goddess of love, music, and joy. This lively annual party involved wine, music, and wild dancing to honor the legend of Hathor saving the world by drinking herself silly. Participants believed that by reenacting the goddess's drunken joy, they restored the universe's balance, bringing chaos back to order. Is there a sexual undertone? Almost definitely, but it wasn't taboo. Egyptians didn't see sex through guilt or shame. To them, it was part of the natural cycle, important and sacred, like the Nile's overflowing waters. In fact, some healing temples even included rituals to solve fertility problems, not just with herbs, but through symbolic acts involving touch, suggestion, or sacred role play, all supervised by temple staff acting as go-betweens for humans and gods. In ancient Egypt, pleasure wasn't indulgence, it was connection to the divine, and every kiss from the Nile reminded them that life was basically a sensual gift from the gods. Now, Rome, where even chaos had a system, shows this best at Lupercalia, the annual fertility festival held every February under Palatine Hill. Show up at Lupercalia, the annual fertility festival held every February beneath Palatine Hill, starting as a wild rural party honoring shepherd gods. It morphed into one of the weirdest public celebrations in Roman history, part cleansing, part bacchanal, and a sprinkle of teasing. The ritual honors Lupercus, a god linked to fertility and livestock protection, but the legend's roots run deeper. The Lupercal cave is said to be the very spot where Romulus and Remus, the twin founders of Rome, were raised, and that primal symbol sneaked right into the celebration itself. The festival's main act, the Luperci, a bunch of young guys embodying wild, untamed energy, wearing little more than some goat skins, or sometimes nothing at all. They'd sprint through the streets, horsing around and smacking women with strips of leather called februa. But here's the kicker. Instead of being insulted, women actually chased after these leather whips. They believed getting whipped boosted fertility, eased childbirth, and even cranked up their sex drive. Yep, ancient fertility therapy. It was messy, loud, and shamelessly crude. There were sacrifices, parties, and hymns, but also a sacred side. Lupercalia marked the city's cleansing, a symbolic shooing away of winter's gloom to make room for spring's fresh start. Sure, there was a sexy undertone, but it packed layers of myths, nature, and destiny. Later Roman poets, including Ovid, wrote about Lupercalia with a mix of humor and nostalgia, while conservative voices tried to tame the festival over time. The tradition stuck around for centuries until Christianity showed up with its stricter moral rulebook. Interestingly, some historians think Valentine's Day might have evolved from the ashes of Lupercalia, swapping goat skins for heart-shaped paper, but the original idea is still there: fertility, love, and humanity's weird urge to ritualize desire. Rome never separated the physical from the sacred. They twisted them together, like vines around temple columns, sometimes tangled, but always connected, and once a year, everyone let their inner wolf run wild. If Lupercalia was a wild public spectacle, the Eleusinian mysteries were its spiritual opposite: secretive, sacred, and super serious, held annually for over 1,000 years in ancient Greece. These rites revolved around the legend of Demeter and Persephone, giving initiates deep insights into life, death, and rebirth. But beneath the poetic myth and theatrical silence, some scholars suspect the rituals included symbolic, maybe even sensual elements cloaked in metaphor, taking place at the Eleusis Sanctuary, northwest of Athens. This mystery festival drew thousands from philosophers to farmers. Unlike most Greek religious ceremonies, these rites didn't care about social status or gender. The only rule: keep it hush-hush. Spill the secrets, and you could face punishment, sometimes even death. The core story focused on Persephone, a girl kidnapped by Hades and dragged to the underworld. Her mom, Demeter, goddess of agriculture, was so heartbroken the whole earth withered. Their ultimate reunion symbolized life's return in spring and hope for the afterlife. What about the sexual angle? Probably everything. The myth itself is loaded with symbolism: kidnapping, descent, reunion, and fertility. Some scholars think the Eleusinian climax involved a dramatic reenactment, maybe a ritual pairing between Persephone and a divine male consort, whether literal or totally symbolic. This experience was said to be emotionally, psychologically, and maybe physically intense. Participants fasted, marched in torchlight processions, drank a mysterious potion called kykeon, and entered the telesterion, the inner chamber where the final rites happened. Whatever they saw in that space changed them forever. Many described it as a moment of enlightenment, an intimate encounter with sacred truth, Pesfanani, and a divine male consort, whether literal or purely symbolic. This experience is said to overwhelm the emotions, psyche, and maybe even the body. Participants fast, march in torchlit processions, drink a mysterious brew called kykeon, and enter the telesterion, the inner chamber where the final rituals unfold. Whatever they see in that space changes them forever. Many describe it as a moment of enlightenment. Whatever they see in that space changes them forever. Many call it a moment of enlightenment, an intimate meeting with sacred truth. No one ever wrote down what happened. That's how deep the vow of silence runs. The mysteries of Eleusinian rites weren't just about pleasure. They were about transformation, about the idea that sexuality and divinity could meet not as opposites, but in unity, in a world where death is always lurking. Eleusis offered hope that maybe light could come from darkness, that return from separation and sacred union could bring eternal renewal. While Western culture tends to wrap sensuality in myth or secrecy, ancient India took a more direct and spiritual approach. Enter Tantra, a complex, often misunderstood tradition that sees sexual energy not as sin, but as sacred power, a divine spark that, if handled right, could lead to enlightenment. Tantra isn't just one religion or doctrine. It popped up in various branches of Hinduism and Buddhism and evolved over centuries. But at its core, it believes the physical world and spiritual world aren't separate. To reach the divine, you can't ditch your body. You live fully inside it. Some tantric sects cooked up elaborate rituals turning everyday acts, eating, breathing, even intimacy, into paths toward liberation. Among the most famous and eyebrow-raising rituals are tantric sex ceremonies, carefully arranged encounters between partners. And no, this isn't just about indulgence. These are sacred rituals done with meditation, breath control, and intentionality. Every move means something. Every moment has a purpose. The man represents Shiva, the calm, the consciousness. The woman is Shakti, energy, creation. Their union mirrors the merging of opposites, the eternal dance between chaos and order, spirit and matter. The goal isn't pleasure, it's transcendence, a fleeting glimpse of the divine through the lens of desire. But let's clear up a common misconception. Not all tantric rituals involve sex. In fact, most tantric practices are deeply aesthetic. Chanting, visualization, yoga, and intense focus are the main acts when sex shows up. It's just one layer, often wrapped in so much symbolism. It's like decoding ancient hieroglyphics. Yet some texts, like the Kama Sutra, often mistaken as just a sex manual, actually come from the same worldview. Joy isn't condemned. It's studied, refined, and woven into a bigger spiritual system. In medieval temples, like Khajuraho and Konark, sculptures of lovers entwined decorate stone walls, not just for decoration, but to make a statement. The path to the divine runs right through the senses. For ancient tantric followers, desire wasn't a distraction, it was fuel, and when led by wisdom and reverence, desire could blaze a straight trail to the heart of the cosmos. Before Babylon, before Egypt's golden dynasties, there was Sumer, one of the world's earliest civilizations, and in the bustling temple complexes, especially in Uruk, the origins of sacred sex began to take shape. The central figure here was the goddess Inanna, later known as Ishtar, along with her mysterious priestesses, women whose bodies were vessels of divine power. These women weren't your average hookers. They were called hierogals, sacred servants. Their sexuality was ritualized, honored, and seen as part of cosmic order. In Sumerian texts and hymns, Inanna is described as a passionate, sensual goddess who celebrates love, fertility, and pleasure. Her temple rituals reflected this spirit, a fusion of spirit and flesh, into a unique form of worship. One of the most fascinating rites was the sacred marriage ceremony. Every year at the New Year festival, the local king would symbolically marry the goddess through a high priestess. The ceremony included music, offerings, poetry, and according to many scholars, even physical union. This wasn't just a show, it was the heart of the city's renewal. By reenacting the goddess's sacred union with her lover Dumuzi, ritualized, honored, and seen as part of the cosmic order. In Sumerian texts and hymns, Inanna is described as a passionate, sensual goddess who celebrates love, fertility, and pleasure. Her temple rituals reflected this spirit, a blend of spirit and body into one complete form of worship. One of the most fascinating rites was the sacred marriage ritual. Every year during the New Year festival, the king would symbolically marry the goddess through a high priestess. The ceremony included music, offerings, poetry, and according to many scholars, some physical joining too. This wasn't just a show, it was the heart of the city's renewal. By reenacting the goddess's sacred union with her lover, Dumuzi, the king was legitimized, crops were blessed, and the cycle of life refreshed, even outside this big event. Sacred sex remained part of the temple's rhythm. Inanna's priestesses were trained in music, dance, magic, and the art of love. For those seeking spiritual cleansing or divine favor, coupling with a hierodule was said to bring healing, insight, or fertility. It was a rite, not a transaction. While others were stuck on the temple's outskirts, easy pickings for exploitation. Over time, the sacredness faded, and later, empires painted these customs in a much darker light, turning the holy into the profane. But back in ancient Sumer, the body wasn't something to suppress. It was a channel, like a river flowing through fertile land, carrying the divine along. And inside Inanna's sacred chambers, love wasn't just a feeling, it was a ritual, far from the mystic temples of the East and India's secret ceremonies. The ancient Celts celebrated fertility with fire, freedom, and forests. Their sacred festival was called Beltane, held on a May night, right when spring and summer swapped places, and the line between nature and the supernatural got delightfully blurry. It was a party for life, growth, and desire, and not a modest little shindig either. The Celts believed the world was stuffed with spiritual energy, souls in trees, rivers, stones, and during Beltane, the powers of fertility and rebirth hit their peak. Huge bonfires lit on hilltops symbolized cleansing and protection. People danced around the flames, jumped through smoke for blessings, and even herded cattle between fires to keep disease away in the coming season. But what happened after the flames died down is what gave Beltane its legendary rep. Unmarried men and women would sneak off into the woods for a ritual called the Greenwood Marriage. These temporary unions ignored society's rulebook and usually went down under the starry sky. No scandal here. Quite the opposite. These trysts were considered sacred acts in tune with the land's fertility. Joining a partner on Beltane night meant syncing with the cosmic rhythm of nature, reflecting the sacred union of Mother Earth and the horned god, the holy mix of masculine and feminine. Some records even say married couples could pause their vows that night, not because they were unfaithful, but out of respect for tradition and renewal. Kids conceived during Beltane were sometimes called children of fire, believed to be blessed with strength and vitality. It was a festival where rules loosened up, desires were honored, and life was celebrated with all the volume of a rock concert. No temples needed. Nature was the altar, the forest, the bedroom, the fire, and the witness. Then Christianity showed up and started condemning or crushing these activities. But the echoes of Beltane still linger in modern May Day rituals, folk dances, and whispered tales of old customs. As Christianity spread across Europe and the Near East, the sacred sects of the ancient world faced extinction. What used to be temple rituals and forest festivals got rebranded as sinful. The body, once seen as a vessel of divine energy, became a source of temptation. Pleasure turned into something to fight against, not celebrate. But this shift didn't happen overnight. In the early days, Christianity wasn't the powerhouse it later became. It grew on the fringes among mystics, aesthetes, and radical thinkers. Some early sects, like the Gnostics, held beliefs echoing older spiritual systems. They saw the physical world, including sex, had been condemned or suppressed. But the echo of Beltane still lives on in modern May Day rituals, folk dances, and whispered tales of old customs. By the time Christianity spread across Europe and the Near East, the sacred sexuality of the ancient world faced extinction. What had been temple rites, forest ceremonies, and festivals were increasingly seen as sinful. The body, once a vessel of divine energy, was turned into a source of temptation. Pleasure became something to fight against, not honor. But this shift didn't happen overnight. In the early days, Christianity wasn't the powerhouse it later became. It grew on the fringes, among mystics, aesthetes, and radical thinkers. Some of these early sects, like the Gnostics, held beliefs that echoed older spiritual systems. They saw the material world, including sex, as a metaphor for higher truths. Some Gnostic texts even viewed the union of male and female as a mirror reflecting the sacred unity of spiritual opposites, kind of like Indian tantric ideas or those symbolic marriages in Sumer. There was this super mysterious cult called the Carpocratians, rumored to do spiritual rituals involving physical union, believing true enlightenment meant experiencing everything, including desire, without shame or fear. These fringe groups quickly got slapped with the heretic label by the newly formed church, their works destroyed or buried, but hints still linger in dusty wagons, banned gospels, and the quiet survival of old symbols recycled for new dogma. As orthodoxy tightened its grip, sacred sex rituals got pushed into the shadows, temples were built or revamped, festivals like Beltane got renamed or banned, and sacred prostitutes became sinners, while seductive mystics were branded heretics. But people are people, remembered in secret, in stories, in symbols. Medieval mystics, like Hildegard of Bingen, wrote about divine ecstasy that suspiciously sounds like physics. Visionaries described spiritual excitement in the language of fusion and passion. Even saints, in their closest chats with God, often blurred the lines between body and spirit with metaphors. And so the sacred didn't vanish, it transformed. What started in Eleusis' groves, Inanna's chambers, and Celtic forests never really died. It went underground, into poetry, dreams, memory, because while temples can be destroyed and rituals banned, the human thirst to merge flesh and divine stays eternal. In the dark hallways of ancient Athens, where reason was supposed to conquer revenge, poison was served in a cup. In 399 BC, the philosopher Socrates, one of the most influential minds in Western thought, was sentenced to death, not by sword, not exile, but by hemlock. This was a strange challenge from the start. Socrates, a man with no property, no books, and who claimed to know nothing, was accused of corrupting youth and introducing new gods. In reality, he became a thorn in Athens's elite side, constantly questioning authority, mocking so-called wise guys, and teaching students to do the same. His relentless questioning wasn't seen as education, but as rebellion. The court offered alternatives. He could suggest a lighter punishment, a fine, exile, whatever. But stubborn Socrates, true to form in life and death, refused to plead. Instead, he proposed something ridiculous, that he be rewarded for his contributions to Athens. The jury did not find this funny. Death by hemlock. Hemlock isn't a flashy assassin's blade, but a clinical paralysis, starting from limbs and creeping up to the heart. No blood, no screams, just silence. On his last day, surrounded by friends and students, Socrates stayed cheerful. He bathed, said goodbye to his kids, and drank the poison calmly and resignedly. As the cold numbness reached his feet, he kept talking about the soul's immortality, discussing death not as an end but a transition. His followers cried. Socrates did not. He died clear-minded. A final lesson in control, faith, and principle. He could have escaped. His supporters arranged it, but he chose to obey the law, even the unjust one, believing that breaking city order would do more harm than his death. So Athens got rid of its greatest critic, not with chains or torture, but with a cup of tea brewed from a deadly root. Killing Socrates didn't silence him. It made him immortal. Hemlock keeps talking. It echoes through time. Speaking of Cleopatra, you might picture the glamorous queen in silk, whispering Latin to Julius Caesar and Greek to Mark Antony. But beyond politics and poetry, Cleopatra was a science student, especially in toxicology. She wasn't just pretty, she was dangerous in ways few expected. As ruler of Egypt, Cleopatra had access to one of the greatest libraries of the ancient world, and inside those scrolls weren't just secrets about stars and gods, but about poisons, venoms, and their effects on body and mind. Rumor has it, she kept a beyond politics and poetry. Cleopatra was a science nerd too, especially in toxicology. Not just a pretty face, she was dangerous in ways nobody expected. As Egypt's ruler, Cleopatra had access to one of the greatest libraries of the ancient world. Inside those scrolls were secrets not just about stars and gods, but poisons, venoms, and their effects on body and mind. Rumor has it, she kept a personal lab and even experimented on prisoners, testing various concoctions to see which poisons killed fast, which caused pain, and which left no trace. She wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. In her world, poison was politics. It was preparation. Cleopatra didn't trust swords or battles. To get the job done when a drop of venom could be quicker, quieter, and way more precise. Poison assassination was the surgeon's scalpel in a ruler's toolkit. And Cleopatra, she was a surgeon. She studied deadly nightshade, strychnine, hemlock, and aconite. She experimented with mixes of snake venom and herbs. Some poisons caused hallucinations, some mimicked illness, some could kill in a flash, others dragged it out over hours, giving time for confessions or finger pointing. And, of course, there was the asp, the snake she allegedly used to snuff out her own life. Legend goes that when Octavian, later Augustus Caesar, conquered Egypt, Cleopatra refused the humiliating parade through Rome as a prisoner. Instead, she gripped a venomous snake to end her story, but even that death is debated. Some historians think she might have swallowed a fast-acting poison hidden in a hairpin or ointment. After all, Cleopatra had to know which poisons caused convulsions and which ones offered a peaceful exit. The cobra might just be the perfect symbol, a silent bite from a queen too proud to be caged. For Cleopatra, poisoning wasn't a crime. It was control. It was the art of deciding who lives, who dies, and how history remembers her. And if enemies underestimated her because of her charm, they rarely lived long enough to regret it. In the Roman Empire, power didn't just corrupt it, poisoned, literally. Behind the golden pillars of the imperial palace, poison became the go-to method for getting rid of rivals. No messy civil wars, no public executions, just a cup of wine, a bowl of figs, and a corpse. Before dessert, emperors were no strangers to betrayal, and few trusted their inner circle. In the 1st century AD, under Emperor Claudius, poison hit its peak thanks to one woman, Livia, Rome's most notorious pro-poisoner. Livia wasn't just a shadowy figure lurking in an alley with a vial. She was a trained expert, basically an ancient chemist, serving the political ambitions of the powerful. When young Agrippina, Claudius's wife, wanted her son Nero on the throne, she called in Livia. The result, a carefully poisoned mushroom dish, Claudius's favorite, and the emperor's health quickly declined, but it didn't stop there. After Nero became emperor, he hired Livia as his royal hitwoman. When his teenage stepbrother Britannicus became a threat to the throne, Livia was summoned again. The young prince died mid-feast, convulsing in front of horrified guests. Nero was so impressed, he gave Livia a full pardon, land, and even apprentices to train in her deadly craft. In Rome, poison was the weapon of the elite, sophisticated, clever, and hard to trace. While a sword left witnesses, poison left suspicion. Was it illness, indigestion, or divine punishment? The paranoia it caused was massive. Cups were tested, food was tasted, even slaves were suspected. Rome developed complex defenses, using silver spoons to detect poison, emerald-based antidotes, and a famous cure made from dozens of ingredients, including opium and viper meat. But nothing stopped the slow flow of silent deaths. Poison in Rome wasn't just a tool, it was a language, a quiet negotiation between survival and ambition. And in marble halls soaked with blood, whispers echoed louder than swords. In ancient China, poisoning wasn't a crime, but an art. In the Han, Tang, and Ming courts, it became a refined power language used in whispers, silk sleeves, and teacups. No grand gestures, just a soft breath and then silence. Chinese elites were masters of pharmacology. Traditional medicine blurred the line between healing and harming. Just one too many pinches of an herb, and a cure turned into poison. The alchemists and court healers had to walk a tightrope, whipping up antidotes one day and deadly toxins the next. But the real pros in this silent war were often women, especially the emperor's concubines and palace maids, barred from swords or political titles. Some turned to sneakier methods. You could take out a rival not with scandal, but with sickness. Empress Yang Guifei probably never raised her voice, just a raised eyebrow. Then, a few days later, a rival would be coughing up blood in bed. A notorious example is Empress Lu of the Han Dynasty. Once she grabbed power, she systematically eliminated threats to her rule, including rivals in the harem. Her methods, brutal, slow poison, and dismemberment. She wasn't just feared, she was legendary, a ruler who used medicine not to heal the empire, but to bend it to her will. Even outside the palace, poison remained, a terrifying political weapon. Rumor had it that assassins from secret societies, like the Five Venoms cult, would coat their blades with poisonous herbs or lace ritual wine with toxins. Poison wasn't just effective, it was dramatic. A statement. It said, "I can reach you even here because of this." China developed one of the ancient world's most advanced poison detection systems. Officials tested meals with silver chopsticks, believing they'd tarnish on contact with arsenic. The royal kitchen became a mini lab, not just for flavor, but for safety. In China, poisoning wasn't impulsive. It was precise, ritualistic, a chess move, not a street brawl, and even if rarely seen, it still ruled dynasties like emperors once did in ancient Indian courts. There's a chilling story so wild it sounds like myth, but it appears in royal texts, legends, and political treatises. Meet the Vishakhas, or poison maidens women whose bodies were said to be deadly weapons, not because they carried daggers, but because they were daggers. Legend has it some girls, chosen young, were given tiny doses of poison daily. Drop by drop, their bodies built immunity, but in return, their blood, sweat, and even breath became toxic to others, especially lovers. They say a Vishakhana's kiss could mean death. Intimacy wasn't passion, it was execution. This practice supposedly started under Chanakya, a crafty strategist and royal advisor to Chandragupta Mauryas. Around the 4th century BCE, Chanakya was a big fan of espionage and psychological warfare. According to the Arthashastra, an ancient political manual attributed to him, poison wasn't just a war tool, it was an art of statecraft. Enemies could be seduced and killed without swinging a single sword. Were Vishakhanas real? That's still up for debate. Some scholars say they're metaphorical, symbols of seductive danger, or cautionary tales about palace temptations. Others think there might have been real attempts to create such assassins through gradual poisoning, a method known in Ayurveda and ancient medicine as Vishakrama, even if just legend. The fear they inspired was real. Foreign officials were warned, meals were tested, and any beautiful stranger arriving at court might be seen not as a gift, but a threat wrapped in silk. Poison in India wasn't always hidden in cups. Sometimes it wore jewelry, smiled sweetly, and danced in the royal palace, and the idea that beauty could kill fueled centuries of scheming, suspicion, and countermeasures. What makes the Vishakhana legend terrifying isn't just the poison, but the ever-present danger. Death doesn't charge into battle. It leans in close and whispers, if any king, suspicion and countermeasures. What made the Vishakhana legend terrifying wasn't just the poison, but the looming danger. Death didn't charge into battle. It leaned in close and whispered, if there was any king who saw threats lurking in every shadow. It was Herod the Great, ruler of Judea under Roman rule in the 1st century BC, a man of massive architecture, brutal politics, and deep paranoia. Herod didn't just trust his sword to keep him on the throne. In his court, poison was paranoia liquefied. Herod's reign was notorious for violence, but not all his executions were public. Some were private. His fear of rivals, Roman suspicion, and most tragically, his own family, his wife, Miriam, a Hasmonean princess from noble stock, was once the love of his life, but Herod convinced himself she was plotting against him. She was executed, just like her mother, her grandfather, and eventually his own sons, according to Josephus, the ancient Jewish historian. Herod secretly poisoned Miriam's sons under the guise of Roman justice. They were the rightful heirs, well known, and had royal Jewish blood, which made them dangerous. Herod couldn't allow any future coup to have a noble head. The poisonings didn't stop there. Herod used informants, interrogators, and even poison to quietly eliminate anyone who seemed disloyal. Ministers, servants, relatives. Some were forced to drink the poison to confess. Others disappeared without explanation, their illnesses blamed on divine wrath or bad air. Poison let Herod rule with brutal cruelty. No public uproar like with crucifixions or beheadings. It was clean, discreet, and it sent a message. No one was untouchable, not even his own blood. Herod's obsession with poison wasn't just about assassination. In his final days, tormented by illness and madness, he feared dying unloved. So he ordered famous Jewish leaders rounded up and executed after his death to make sure the whole country mourned. Luckily, that order never came to pass, but paranoia had long poisoned his legacy in the grand halls of the Palladium. Among golden columns and carvings of warriors and lions, another battle raged not armies, but whispers and wine cups in the Achaemenid Empire, where kings ruled continents. Poison was a refined, elegant, deadly, and often invisible tool. The Persian court under kings like Darius the Great and Xerxes was lavish and formal, but also a hotbed of political intrigue, palace rivalries, and dynastic ambition, with dozens of wives, concubines, sons, governors, and generals all jockeying for influence. Poison was the silent equalizer. Greek historical sources, especially Herodotus, tell of assassination plots disguised by luxury. Food tasters were a regular gig, and the kitchens were locked down like military bases. Just a whiff of poison suspicion could get a cook or wine pourer executed on the spot. One infamous figure was Bagoas, a Persian eunuch and court official who rose to massive power under Artaxerxes III in the 4th century BC. Records say Bagoas didn't just poison enemies, but even the king himself, then installed a puppet king only to poison him when he got difficult. Bagoas's followers controlled the court not by armies, but by poison vials. The Persians' herbal medicine knowledge was advanced, and so was their understanding of toxins. From Aite to Asen, they experimented with slick agents, slow-acting stuff mimicking natural diseases, or fast-acting ones like lightning bolts. Poison wasn't just execution, it was an art of subtlety, because in Persia, power was all about appearances. Public killings risked scandal, but poison let the empire breathe easy while enemies died silently in their beds. A noble would go to sleep feeling victorious and never wake up. Even discreet, because in Persia, power was all about appearances. Public murders risked scandal, but poison let the empire breathe easy while enemies died silently in their beds. A noble would go to sleep feeling victorious and never wake up. Even Alexander the Great's death, right after conquering Persia, was rumored to be caused by an Eastern poison slipped into his wine at a Babylonian party, whether true or not. This suspicion shows the Persians had a reputation for invisible warfare. In the Achaemenid Empire, kings ruled through image, wealth, and order, less dramatic than Rome's palaces or Persia's harems. Ancient Israel and surrounding cultures weren't immune to poison either. In fact, the Bible contains some through images, wealth, and order, though way less dramatic than Rome's palaces or Persia's harems, the ancient land of Israel. And its neighbors weren't strangers to poison. In fact, the Bible has some seriously weird references to deadly herbs, tainted drinks, and divine tests involving poison-induced bruises, suggesting poison was known, feared, and sometimes even used as proof of guilt or innocence. One of the strangest examples comes from the Book of Numbers, describing a ritual called the bitter water ordeal. If a husband suspected his wife of cheating, he could drag her to a priest who'd mix holy water with temple dust and force her to drink it. The idea was simple. If she was guilty, that cursed drink would make her belly bloat and curse her womb. If she was innocent, nothing would happen. This wasn't just divine intervention. It was the first known poison test, a dangerous liquid used not to kill instantly, but to provoke a reaction and spill the truth. Elsewhere in the Bible, poison appears more metaphorically, but still with dark meaning. In Deuteronomy, Israel is warned against worshiping false gods with threats that their food and water would be cursed. Gall and wormwood, both ancient for their bitterness and toxicity, show up too. In Job, poison is likened to injustice, and in the Psalms, evildoers are said to have poison under their tongues, symbolizing lies and murderous intent. Also, there's Herod, famous in the New Testament for his poisonings, tying biblical history to the bigger picture of toxic politics in the ancient world. While we don't get those dramatic poison assassinations in the Bible's main texts, the awareness of poison's power definitely lingered. The Jews lived among empires where poisoning was a courtly art, and they adapted their legal and spiritual interpretations to fit that dangerous reality. Across ancient empires, from Athens' palaces to Egyptian sands, from Rome's courts to Indian forests, one weapon remained popular, classy, and terrifying: poison. No armies needed. It didn't march onto battlefields. It killed quietly, with no witnesses and usually no blame. In an era when force ruled the public square, poison was the go-to tool for private wars. Conflicts happened behind curtains, in bedrooms, at banquets, and temples. It was political balance, a whispered death, where just one scream could cause chaos. But poison wasn't just a method, it was a message. In ancient times, dying by the sword was an honor. It meant you were a threat worthy of open confrontation, but dying by poison, that was something else entirely. It meant someone close, someone trusted, made a choice. Poison always came with betrayal: a servant, a wife, the wine server, a family member. It turned every bite into a gamble, every cup into a loyalty test. The ancient world valued the subtlety of poison, Philosophers saw it as a symbol of fate, punishment, and power disguised as grace. Religion saw it as divine judgment, and rulers used it to keep up a facade of peace while quietly rewriting their bloodlines. What made poison endure was its paradox, cowardly yet clever, invisible but unforgettable. It didn't just kill the body, it eroded trust, sowed suspicion, and left long-lasting scars on legacies. Its myth lives on today. Socrates' deadly hemlock, Cleopatra's cobra, Claudius's poisoned fig, India's Vishakanyas. These weren't just deaths, deadly tales. They're parables, reminding us that on the stage of power, the most dangerous players are often the ones who never step on stage. Poison has no face, no voice, no armor, but in ancient history, it shaped dynasties, rewrote successions, and crept through every corridor of power. It was, and still is, the perfect assassin. It all started with wood, dust, and skill along the Nile in ancient Egypt, land of pyramids, priests, and precision. Protecting your stuff wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. Whether it was grain, so they invented something revolutionary, the bolt lock, dating back to 2000 BC. This is the earliest known mechanical lock in history, carved entirely from wood. This thing looks pretty primitive by today's standards, but genius in concept. The lock had a horizontal bolt sliding into a frame to secure the door. The bolt had holes drilled inside it, and when pushed into place, a set of vertical pins dropped down into those holes, locking the bolt tight. To open it, you needed a key, but not just any key. This ancient Egyptian key was a big wooden tool, often shaped like a toothbrush with pegs. Insert it into the lock, and the key would lift the pins out of the bolt holes, letting the bolt slide open. No brute force, no lockpicking, just design and gravity at work. This wasn't just a gadget, it was a philosophy of protection. Egyptians believed in order, ma'at, not chaos. Managing who gets in or stays out of a room carried deep meaning. Locks were used in homes, temples, and tombs. Pharaohs were buried in sealed rooms, sometimes with locked doors and fake passages. Security wasn't just about possessions, it was about eternity. What's surprising is how familiar this technology feels. The basic idea of pins and keys from this ancient Egyptian wooden lock still lives on in modern metal locks today. Pins fall into holes, keys lift them up to line everything up. This idea is 4,000 years old and basically unchanged. Though the wooden mechanisms rotted away and only a few original keys survived, the design was so effective it spread far and wide. It traveled from Egypt to the Greeks, then the Romans, and finally the entire world, before the clickety-clack of modern locks and sliding bolts. There were seals and the silent guards of ancient Mesopotamia. In Babylon and Nineveh, locks as we know them weren't common yet. But the people of Mesopotamia developed a super effective way to secure, authenticate, and restrict access. Their solution wasn't mechanical, it was symbolic. Enter the cylinder seal. These tiny, intricately carved cylinders were worn around the neck or wrist, like rings or pendants. Each seal was unique, a personal signature, often engraved with mythological scenes, animals, gods, or even cuneiform script, or the silent guards of ancient Mesopotamia. In Babylon and Nineveh, locks as we know them weren't common yet, but the people of Mesopotamia developed a super effective method for security, authentication, and limiting access. Their solution wasn't mechanical, it was symbolic. Enter the cylinder seal. These tiny, intricately carved cylinders were worn around the neck or wrist, like rings or pendants. Each seal was unique, a personal signature, often carved with mythological scenes, animals, gods, or even cuneiform inscriptions. To use it, you'd roll the cylinder over soft, wet clay, leaving an imprint like an ancient barcode. The seal was used to close jars, lock up doors, and coffin guards. If anyone tried breaking in, the clay seal would crack, making sabotage a piece of cake. Plus, that seal basically told you who locked the box or room. No key needed to open it. You just needed a damn good reason to break the seal. Sure, it was primitive, but crazy effective in a world where reputation and official marks carried huge weight. In temples, monks sealed sacred storerooms with their personal marks. Merchants signed contracts. Even kings used seals to lock down their correspondence. The whole economy ran on these tiny engraved tokens. Security in Mesopotamia wasn't about brute force denial, but about proving legitimacy. If the seal was intact, the contents were safe. If it was broken, something was definitely up. The seal system introduced a radical new idea: identity as security. A seal wasn't just a tool, it was a badge of trust, power, and often legitimate authority. Lose your seal, and you didn't just lose a tool, you lost your name. It's not an exaggeration to call these cylinder seals the first two-factor authentication ever. No passwords or pins, just a physical artifact that said, "This is mine, and only I get to open it." While Mesopotamians relied on seals and Egyptians mastered wooden bolt locks, the ancient Greeks brought a fresh new craft to personal security. With cities, homes, temples, and treasuries growing, Greeks started developing smaller, sturdier, and more practical lock mechanisms. Along came locksmithing, a legit ancient profession. Greek locks were a big upgrade from bulky Egyptian wooden designs. They often used metal parts, though many pieces were still wood, thanks to resource limits and budget cuts. The most common form was the bolt lock, where a sliding bar fit into a notch or groove on the door frame. It was held in place by metal pins or bolts and could only be opened by a specially shaped key, usually bronze or iron. But Greek keys weren't the sleek, pocket-sized things we know today. They were long, L-shaped bars, sometimes nearly forearm length. To unlock a door, you'd stick the key into a vertical keyhole and use it to lift and manipulate the internal pins or bolts, sliding the lock open. This was both a physical and symbolic act. Carrying the key meant carrying power, and using the key was a declaration of control over a space. Temples used locks to guard offerings. Wealthy citizens locked chests full of coins or jewelry. Even public buildings had secure storage rooms. This tech wasn't everywhere yet. Most ordinary homes just used wooden bolts or simple bars. But in the world of nobles, scholars, and priests, locks became both tools and status symbols. What set Greeks apart wasn't just the mechanism, but the philosophy behind their locks. Security in Athens was deeply tied to property rights and citizenship. A locked door meant privacy, ownership, and autonomy. Locksmiths were no longer just craftsmen, they were trust experts in an era shaped by fiery public debates and private dramas. The Greek lock was the silent buddy keeping secrets safe behind oak doors and stone vaults. If Greeks laid the groundwork, the Romans perfected it. By the height of the Roman Empire, locks were no longer experimental. They were everywhere, in homes, temples, shops, and even on slaves' wrists. Romans brought structure to everything they touched: roads, laws, the military, and security were no exception. Roman locks got smaller, tougher, and smarter. They used metal parts, mostly bronze and iron, meaning these locks were tougher and harder to break. The most common type was the bolt lock, a system where only keys with the right grooves could turn inside to move the bolt. Hospital rooms were secured with internal barriers, and if your key doesn't have the right cuts, it simply won't turn. Enter the master key, a simple key able to open simpler locks. The Romans loved this little trick, and so did the thieves. But the real magic was in the Roman puzzle locks. These were tiny, finely crafted mechanisms, usually built into boxes or chests. These locks didn't just need the right key, they sometimes required a secret sequence of moves or pressure points to open. Some even had fake keyholes to throw off any sneaky intruders. Think of it as the ancient world's version of a combo safe. Roman keys themselves were usually small and sleek, sometimes worn like rings, a handy mix of function and flair. Romans often sported their keys on their fingers as a status symbol. Having a key basically said, "Hey, I own something worth locking up." Fun fact: some locks were even strapped onto slaves' necklaces with tags like "If found, please return to owner." Those locks didn't guard treasure, they enforced ownership. Creepy, but also a reminder that security in Rome wasn't just about valuables, it was about power. The Roman Empire's approach to locks was personal. Keys fit your lock, not just any lock. They didn't just protect gold, they guarded letters, heirlooms, recipes, and sometimes secrets. While the West was busy upgrading keys and bolts, the East quietly crafted their own elegant mechanical masterpieces. In ancient China, lockmaking wasn't just practical, it reflected balance, precision, and sometimes even spiritual harmony. By the Han Dynasty around 100 BC, Chinese artisans were crafting full metal locks, usually bronze and later iron, compact, portable, and complicated. Unlike the big, obvious locks found in Egypt or Greece, Chinese locks were discreet and efficient, often attached to chests, cabinets, and even gates. The most iconic shape was the suo lock, usually barrel or rectangular, with a flat key inserted at one end. Inside, a row of pins or springs would line up perfectly when the right key slid in, letting the bolt slide free. Sound familiar? It should. The pin tumbler design borrowed the same logic the Egyptians pioneered centuries earlier, but the Chinese miniaturized and toughened it up. Some locks took the shape of animals or mythical creatures, dragons, tigers, turtles, mixing practical use with symbolic protection. A tiger-shaped lock on your chest wasn't just about security, it was spiritual armor, signaling strength, protection, and sometimes good luck. China also invented trick locks, the first puzzle locks, requiring multiple steps or angles to fool anyone trying to open them. These weren't just for guarding cash or jewelry. Scholars and officials locked away important documents, calligraphy, or heirlooms in boxes only the savvy could open. Security involved brains, not just ownership. Locksmithing became a respected craft. Some artisans kept their secrets within families for generations. Others invented new designs that spread along the Silk Road, influencing security systems all the way to the Middle East. In ancient India, amidst temples, scrolls, and palace corridors, security was more than protection. It was art, ritual, and sometimes spiritual safeguarding. Though India's ancient locks aren't as numerous as Roman or Chinese ones, Sanskrit texts and archaeological finds show that by the Maurya Empire wasn't just about physical protection, it was spiritual protection. The design conveyed power, guardianship, and sometimes even luck. China also developed tricky puzzle locks, early versions of those multi-step or angle-twisting locks that make you feel like a locksmith or magician. These weren't just for guarding cash or jewelry. Scholars and officials stored important documents, calligraphy, or family heirlooms in locked boxes only those who understood the mechanism could open. Security was about intelligence, not just ownership. Locksmithing became a respected craft. Some artisans kept their techniques secret, passing them down through families. Others innovated new designs that spread along the Silk Road, influencing security systems as far as the Middle East. In the heart of ancient India, amidst temples, scrolls, and intricate palace corridors, security was seen not just as protection, but also as art, ritual, and sometimes even spiritual safeguard. Although ancient Indian locks are fewer than Roman or Chinese ones, palace corridors were a maze. And security wasn't just about protection, it was an art form, a ritual, sometimes even spiritual protection. While ancient Indian locks weren't as numerous as Roman or Chinese ones, Sanskrit texts and archaeological finds show that during the Maurya Empire, around 300 BCE, mechanical locks weren't just a thing, they were everywhere. Indian locks were mostly guarding temples, treasure rooms, and chests. Many weren't just holding wealth. They also protected sacred relics or royal documents. These locks were mostly metal and small in size, and worked with levers or internal bolts. Some even had sliding latches, kind of like the Chinese and Roman designs. But the real genius of ancient Indians was their move toward camouflage for security. Carved wooden panels in temples and royal palaces sometimes hid secret compartments or fake drawers guarded by locks only a chosen few knew how to operate. Just push the right spot or twist a carved leaf, and boom, the panel pops open or snaps shut. Some of these mechanisms still baffle modern restorers. Built with such precision and mystery, it's basically architectural wizardry. Sanskrit texts like the Arthashastra, a political and economic treatise from the Maurya era, detail the importance of protecting info, treasures, and royal assets with secret rooms, double doors, and disguised locks. These weren't just mechanical devices, they were psychological traps. The idea wasn't just to stop intruders, but to keep them from even realizing there was something worth protecting. Locks in India also had deep symbolic meaning. Temple gates might be locked, not just for security, but as part of ritual, only opening on auspicious days. Some lock designs featured lotus flowers, snakes, or sacred geometric patterns, serving as both barriers and blessings. In Indian philosophy, protection wasn't always about confrontation. It involved diversion, illusion, and wisdom. Meanwhile, in the misty forests and icy fjords of ancient northern Europe, locks were more than just handy tools. They were territorial statements, symbols of ownership, and sometimes talismans against the unknown. For the Celts, who built thriving societies across Iron Age England and Gaul, security was practical, not decorative. Their homes and granaries relied on heavy wooden bars, iron door rings, and sliding bolts. But archaeological digs show the Celts also had locks and keys simple in design, but crafted with jaw-dropping precision. Early evidence points to wrought iron locks similar to those used in the Roman world. These technologies likely spread through contact with Roman merchants or occupying forces, but for the Celts, protection wasn't just mechanical, it was spiritual. Homes were guarded by charms, symbols, and ritual markings on thresholds to keep out not only thieves, but also restless spirits. A locked door might stop burglars, but a carved talisman or hanging charm could ward off mischievous fairies or vengeful ghosts. In their worldview, security wasn't just physical, it was cosmic. The Norse took locks seriously too, especially for storage and seafaring. Viking ships and chests often sported iron locks built to withstand weather, theft, and sabotage. Some Norse keys found in graves resembled snakes, axes, or even tiny Thor's hammers, both practical and powerful symbols. Carrying a key meant owning, commanding, and protecting. Viking women often literally held the family keys. Archaeology shows women buried with intricate lock hooks and key clasps worn at the waist. In a way, keys weren't just about doors, they were status, trust, and identity. Interestingly, Norse mythology also mentions locking and unlocking. Gods used runes to seal doors, and some spells were designed to bind or undo fates, showing the symbolic power of locks beyond the physical world. So, while the North might not have had the fancy puzzle locks of Rome or the philosophical elegance of China, their locks told their own story forged from iron, tradition, and superstition. When the Western Roman Empire fell, the Byzantine Empire rose in the east, carrying on Roman lockmaking and their love for security. But Byzantium didn't just preserve old designs. So, northern India might not have had those fancy puzzle locks like Rome, or the philosophical elegance of China, but their locks told their own story forged from iron, tradition, and superstition. When the Western Roman Empire fell, the Byzantine Empire rose in the east, carrying on Roman lock-making skills and their obsession with locks. But Byzantium didn't just preserve the old designs. They improved them, mixing Roman mechanics with Eastern elegance while passing security tech into the Islamic Golden Age. Byzantine locks were often tiny masterpieces. Their locks looked like animals, crosses, or abstract patterns made from bronze or iron. They used advanced locking systems that needed precisely cut keys. Many Byzantine locks combined rotating bolts, spring mechanisms, and fake keyholes, laying the groundwork for modern puzzle locks. Tradition of wearing keys as a status symbol kept going strong. Bishops and abbots often carried ceremonial keys into churches and archives, treating them like sacred VIP passes. But during the Islamic era, especially in the Abbasid period, security science became both an art and a hotbed of innovation, drawing from Persian, Indian, Greek, and Roman knowledge. Islamic craftsmen elevated locksmithing to a respected profession. The Abbasid rulers in Baghdad developed incredibly sophisticated locks, some with 4 or 5 internal levers, complex latches, and even early combination mechanisms. Their locks were both beautiful and intricate. Bronze locks shaped like lions, fish, or birds weren't just functional, they made a statement. Arabic inscriptions often adorned the sides, praising Allah or naming the owner, showcasing faith, identity, and security. Islamic scholars even wrote treatises on mechanical devices. Al-Jazari, a 12th century Islamic inventor, famously documented dozens of mechanisms, including water clocks and automatic locks, some with intricate gears and hidden triggers. He's often hailed as one of history's first mechanical engineers, and many of his principles still influence lockmaking today. Meanwhile, Islamic markets and palaces relied on these advanced locks to protect everything from treasure chests and holy relics to library doors and merchant stalls. In an era where science and theology walked hand in hand, a well-made lock wasn't just about security. It reflected divine order and human mastery. By the end of antiquity, locks had evolved far beyond bolts and bars. They became symbols of civilization, tools that mirrored a society's values, fears, and ambitions. Whether forged in iron, carved in wood, or hidden behind sacred geometry, ancient locks weren't just about keeping stuff out. They decided who got in. From Egyptian wooden cups to Byzantine mechanical puzzles, every culture added layers of meaning to the story. Every key held power not just practically, but psychologically. Owning the key meant holding authority, access, and often secret-keeping rights. Locks told you who ran the house, who controlled the grain, who had the right to touch scrolls, open temples, or enter tombs. And as technology advanced, so did the protections. Fake locks, hidden latches, lion-shaped locks, or engraved ones. These weren't just defenses, they were messages saying, I'm valuable. I'm protected. I know something you don't. Even more fascinating is how locks shaped human behavior. In cultures that valued hierarchy, locks reinforced boundaries. In bustling, diverse trading societies, they protected markets, homes, and temples from suspicion and theft. In religious systems, they guarded the sacred, not just from people, but from the unclean, the unworthy, the uninitiated. And here's the kicker: the more advanced the lock, the more lockpickers popped up. As civilizations built better security, others learned how to bypass it. The cat and mouse game we know today started thousands of years ago in Mesopotamian grain stores or Roman merchant chests. In the end, ancient locks give us more than a peek at engineering. They offer insight into the human condition, our desire for safety, our suspicion, our need to mark public and private boundaries, and our relentless drive to protect what matters. Because even in the ancient world, a locked door wasn't just a barrier, it was a statement, a silent, persistent whisper saying, "This matters. It's mine, and only I can open it."